Hey everyone, today we're going to dive into some footage coming straight from an inside source in Venezuela. These clips clearly capture the first nights of the attack on Venezuela, giving us a real sense of what's going on in this country. Next up, we'll talk about the seizure of the oil tanker Bella 1, especially with the strict naval blockade currently in place. War Secretary Pete Hegseth has reaffirmed this on social media platform X. We'll also break down the possibility of a second attack. President Trump has stated that a second strike is on the table if certain demands aren't met. So, how might that attack play out? Do the videos we're about to see suggest a higher likelihood of a second strike due to the chaos and the interim government's inability to secure the nation? And finally, we'll wrap up with a video of an Igla 1S surface-to-air missile being fired at a U.S. target, along with the American response. So stick around until the end to catch it all. Comment 1 if you support the United States, or 2 if you stand with Venezuela. Alright, let's get into some of these videos now. I'll try to comment as we go, but mostly, I want you to feel the reality of what's happening in Venezuela for yourselves. You can see the streets are in total chaos. After a leader gets overthrown, no one really knows who's in charge. Different factions, especially in a country dominated by drug cartels, make it unclear who's calling the shots. Maybe the cartels themselves are stepping up as leaders. Street chaos will keep going until security gets established. You can see that clearly in this footage. Who are those security forces? Are they local police? Gunshots are ringing out over there. Reports say some areas in Caracas have lost power, and the visuals suggest armed personnel might be shutting down electricity, possibly even cutting internet connections at a utility company facility. This video was obviously recorded on the night of the attack. You can see thick smoke rising everywhere. There's a ton of chaos as airstrikes hit. Once again, no one knows who's going to try to grab power in this vacuum. A major strike is happening here, possibly near the Miraflores presidential palace. Most of the attacks are focused around Caracas, but not all of them. Some strikes are happening nationwide, especially targeting air bases housing Su-30 fighter jets. Next is that viral clip we've seen on social media X, showing helicopters moving in. Another big attack seems to be near an airport, with the background looking like one. That's 2 simultaneous strikes, possibly destroying aviation assets or barracks tied to Maduro's guard. We don't know the exact targets yet, but this is some striking footage. Sporadic gunfire echoes in the background of this clip. Clearly, this is a night of all-out war breaking loose. From a rooftop perspective, we're seeing a massive explosion. Could be a Tomahawk cruise missile or a JDAM bomb. On first glance, I'd say it looks like a JDAM blast. Different strikes are targeting power centers of the Maduro regime. That's why the chaos is so intense. Attacks like these turn everyone's lives upside down in Venezuela. The question now is whether the interim president can actually control the country and do right by the people, steering toward a democratic election in the near future. That said, controlling the rival gang factions vying for power is going to be tough. Think about it, their top leader was a cartel boss like Maduro, along with other middlemen. It's not just Maduro. There are other forces at play. You can see some soldiers running through the city center. Maduro's special forces and police, combined with rampant corruption in the city, make rooting out corruption a hard task without a stable economy. Once the economy picks up, and former cartel members can earn legitimate income hundreds of millions of dollars annually from oil, things might look up. Moving on, we see anti-aircraft artillery, AAA, firing into the sky with tracer rounds. They're probably shooting blindly, knowing an attack is coming. Maybe their radar picked up a signal, and they're just firing into the air. Those are big rounds, about 1.2 inches in diameter. More AAA fire, and I'm not sure if this footage has been released before. This is the first time I'm seeing it. Those rounds are huge. And every few seconds, a tracer lights up, meaning there are plenty more rounds you can't see. Street chaos is obvious until an interim government has enough power to protect people and gain legitimacy. It's a long process. This chaos was predictable. Maybe US Green Berets are involved, since this is their specialty, assisting with regime transitions. They're some of the best trained soldiers in the US military. with strategic thinking to stabilize a nation and take out cartel bosses. This video might have been shot on the night after the attacks. It looks like some police forces are trying to stabilize the area, but it's unclear who they're working for. That's the big question. Whose side are they on? Do they really want to establish a legitimate government? Everything's happening so fast they might still be fighting for power, unsure of who's in command. They could be taking orders from 4 or 5 different people. This is where the US State Department steps in to set up a clearer structure. But that takes time. Security is just one piece of the puzzle, and having Green Berets to establish security and make strategic moves is critical. President Trump's ultimatum to the interim government can be summed up like this: ditch all deals with China, Russia, Iran, and Cuba, and lock the oil industry into exclusive partnerships with the US, or face another round of attacks. The seizure of the oil tanker wasn't random. It's a direct hit on the shadow fleet, propping up the old regime's cash flow. Taking down this tanker will keep choking off income for the Maduro regime, which the interim president is still tied to in some ways. The US wants to wipe out corruption and turn Venezuela into a powerhouse oil producer working with American companies. The US has stated a goal of reaching 5 million barrels of oil per day through companies like Exxon. Basically, this would transform Venezuela from an energy bottleneck into a secure ally, which could then sell oil to countries like China, Venezuela's biggest oil buyer. If efficiency ramps up, they'll sell more barrels to China, and things will improve for China by the end of the day. Next, the way Bella 1 was taken down might mirror scenarios I've covered on my channel before, with the US Coast Guard teaming up with special ops units to seize the ship, which had been renamed as a Russian vessel. This is part of a bigger plan to dismantle the shadow fleet. President Trump also demands that Venezuela sell 30 to 50 million barrels of oil from seized reserves under US oversight to fund stabilization and elections in the country. I think this is a solid plan because for a nation to stand on its own, it's not just about security, it's about education. And education comes from the economy. The economy needs a boost to create stability, so people can have a shot at learning. The interim government is currently led by Delcy Rodriguez, Maduro's former vice president. She was sworn in a few days after the raid. The demands on her are strict. Cancel all foreign joint ventures with PDVSA, Venezuela's national oil company, and redirect production entirely to US buyers. That means auditing oil fields around Lake Maracaibo for sabotage, restarting rigs with US tech and crews, and tying every barrel to lifting sanctions. Essentially handing the keys to Exxon and Chevron to ramp up output fast while freezing assets of rivals tied to Russia, China, and Cuba. However, chaos is growing from factions like Maduro loyalists in the military. They're reportedly torching refineries and ambushing patrols of the legitimate government forces. Cartels linked to Sinaloa are said to be hitting supply lines to protect their drug turf. Chinese and Russian operatives embedded here are accused of leaking intel to spark riots in Caracas slums. These groups aim to derail the transition, turning Venezuela into a fractured proxy battlefield. Now, let's imagine a hypothetical scenario for a second attack. Say the interim government ignores the US ultimatum and interim leaders don't meet demands. Loyalist factions start burning more rigs, and Russian Wagner mercenaries coordinate with Chinese surveillance drones at Maracaibo. The U.S. might greenlight another round of Operation Absolute Resolve. In that case, 6 F-22 seconds could take off from Homestead Air Force Base at Mach 1.5, flying over 900 miles, alongside EA-18G Growlers from the USS Ford jamming radar. 12 F-35 seconds would cruise along Venezuela's coast at about 500 miles per hour, then launch SDB bombs at sites guarded by Wagner, China-aligned forces, and Maduro loyalists, destroying dozens of targets in a single wave. MH-47 and CV-22 helicopters would be ready to drop Delta teams into key infrastructure zones around oil fields to protect Venezuela's economy, ensuring oil keeps flowing to generate enough revenue for the interim phase and elections. At this point, the target isn't Maduro or the vice president, it's restarting the economy and securing critical oil pumps. B-1 bombers would also be on standby with JASM missiles for air support, taking out radar stations that could threaten helicopters. Like past operations, The goal is to get in, get out fast, and leave no regrets. As I mentioned at the start of the video, here's the footage of the IGLAS missile being fired. This is a shoulder-launched missile aimed at a helicopter, likely to take it down. We'll see the helicopter's counter-response. The missile launches and hits a hillside. Then comes the response from the helicopter, with targets lit up in the background. Machine gun fire, possibly a minigun from a modified MH-60, rings out. That's the retaliation, with rockets also fired into the area where the IGLAS came from, maybe from Apache helicopters. Not a good day for the IGLAS operator. However, it's said there are about 5,000 of these weapons scattered across Venezuela. This is a massive operation, and extreme caution is needed with helicopters carrying special forces. If a faction tied to cartels gets hold of one of these and fires at a helicopter with special ops, the consequences would be severe. More bursts of gunfire and rockets are fired into that area to suppress the IGLAS source. You can't take this threat lightly, it has to be eliminated. So, there you have it. Is a second attack on the horizon? We'll keep an eye on how things unfold. If the interim government meets U.S. demands, will the situation escalate into a broader guerrilla war? That's something to avoid right now. Clearly, executing precise strikes, taking out the leadership, then pulling back and rebuilding the economy is the goal. Maybe that's what we'll see. What do you think? Will there be a second round of Operation Absolute Resolve? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Comment 1 if you support the United States, or 2 if you stand with Venezuela.